Wow, that's a lot of history you just laid on me there.
Yeah,
Um, just but going back, I just have to say when I first you started off with talking about slide and slave. When I first heard that, I mean, I remember it's like, when JFK was shot or whatever, they talk about where were you? I remember where I was, and the first time I heard slide, that's how bad that track was.
it blew you away, didn't it?
Ah, completely.
I mean, these guys, I mean, the talent that these guys had coming out of Dayton, Ohio was just immense. I mean, I cannot put a dollar sign or a value on it because to see these guys in the studio play the bass or the lead guitar or even sing or even, I mean, not only to say Junie, but there was Sean Sandridge, there was Johnny Wilder, there was Roger Troutman, there was Mark Wood, there was Mark from Slade. I mean, these guys just went on and on. So when you saw one, and they all had a different sound, a funk sound that was a different sound. Heatwave had that English funk sound, and Slave had that kind of black rock funk sound. And I mean, it was an amazing time that should be captured on film. So people can see what truly happened in Dayton, Ohio, from little bitty West Dayton, Ohio. I mean, a little part of Dayton that's less than 5 miles long and less than 5 miles wide had billion-dollar groups come right out of there. And that when you think about Motown, you think about Detroit. Detroit's a big market. When you think about the Philadelphia sound, you think about Philadelphia. Those are major markets. But Dayton's not a major market right now. Like I said, it's the 64th market. And when I was in it, radio back in the 70s, it was a 49th market. So you see, it's dropped a lot. So when you think about that, you see something that is almost a miracle happening because nobody thought it would happen like it did happen. And we're still talking about it today in 2019.
It's funny, looking back when I was a teenager and really deep into all of those groups. I was buying all of those records, sometimes traveling from where I lived by bus, to go to record stores that would get it when they first came out. It was like a drug for me.
Yeah.
But living in Los Angeles at that time, I didn't put it together that all these groups were coming from the same region, Of course, Ohio players, but, they may as well have been like from outer space to me because I had never been outside of Los Angeles. So
right.
I didn't.
But Los Angeles is a major market. It's the number 2 market in the country. So if not being outside of Los Angeles is not nearly saying not being outside of West Dayton, Ohio. Because that's like walking across the street, man. I'm telling you. So that's what makes it so unique, that magic was in one little area of one little area. But then again, when you think Wilbur and Orville Wright had a bicycle shop in West Dayton, and look what they did, So, some great things out of the city.
Well, and even beyond that, I mean, not far away, if you extend to like Cincinnati with Bootsy and the James Brown stuff and the Isley Brothers and just, that entire region is spectacular.
Cincinnati was a great music market. With we know that when we were teenagers, we would go down to a club and watch Little Roger, who was about 6 years old, and Sugar emulate a guy by the name of Jimi Hendrix, who was out of that same region. And we, again, just as teenagers, we were just enjoying some good music. But, a funny story, James Brown called me at the radio station one day and asked me if I had received his record. And I said, "No, sir, Mr. Brown." He liked to be called Mr. Brown. And I said, "No, sir, Mr. Brown, I haven't." He said, "Well, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do to Charles." I said, "No, you don't have to do anything to anybody." I told him to send me the record and I'll be happy to get a listen to it. He said, well, what time do you get off work? I said, 5 o'clock. He said, well, meet me at the airport. So I get my little girlfriend and another couple, and we go out to the airport, and James Brown was supposed to be in about 7:30, and no James Brown. And then it dawned on me I was in the wrong place because James Brown has his own Learjet, and I was over at the commercial side, so I had to go over to the private field. I get over there about 8:15, and the guy up in the booth told me that there was no James Brown that he had scheduled from LaGuardia. And so my friend said, oh, you didn't pull one on us. So about 9:30, we leave and go back home. The couple leaves and goes back. And my little friend, she's down for the evening. About 11 o'clock, the phone rings, and I answered. They said, Turk, where are you at? I said, I'm at home. He said, we out here waiting on you. I get up and drive back out to the private side of the airport, and here this beautiful Learjet sitting there and had JB on the side of it. He said, come on, let's go. I'm like, excuse me, where are we going? He said, don't worry about it. It cost me $5,000 to put this plane in the air. So we get in this 12-seater Learjet with 2 air pilots, just me and him. And I jokingly said, I know you into this black thing, Mr. Brown. How come you don't have some brothers fly this jet? He said, Turk, this jet cost me $4 million. I ain't found no brothers to fly this thing. So I don't know where we went. I can't tell you where we went. We came back about 5 in the morning. I staggered off the plane from drinking that cognac. And he gave me a song, and it was Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. And I came back, and when I told my little friends what had happened and what they missed, of course, nobody believed me, But I had that kind of relationship with James Brown, and we had a good friendship. And whenever he came into the area of Cincinnati, he would actually send a limo down to pick me up, and I would go in the studio with him. And again, another amazing musician in the studio and on stage. I mean, just amazing. And had that same relationship with Barry White. When he would come into the area, I'll never forget, Barry White and I were having dinner at the Hilton in Indianapolis, and he introduced me to escargot. And we were drinking cognac, and if you know anything about Barry White, big guy, had a big appetite. And I'm trying to eat these snails in this hot garlic butter, and they looked like they were moving. They look, after 2 or 3 of them, they looked like they were moving. I'm telling you. And man, I could not keep up with Barry White, but he was another great guy that without Rick James, as wild as Rick James was, when he would come into the area, I was kind of afraid to hang out with him because Rick was Rick would have the sheriff after a while. He would do some crazy things, but talented musicians. I mean, Dayton was just a mecca of talent. And I did an interview in 2018 with a local television station. They asked me, do we ever think that can be brought back, that era can be brought back? And I said, I don't think so. And the reason why, the guy in Dayton that is using the Soul of Dayton is trying to do that is going to be in federal court with me before the year's out, because I own the Soul of Dayton, like I said, and he took it over the last 6 years and trying to make money, and he's showing up in the ratings books, but he doesn't have that magic we had back then. The radio stations are not mom and pop stations. Many of them aren't. They're corporately owned. And so who makes the decisions comes down from corporate. It doesn't come down from, local. Even though the guy in Dayton is trying to recopy some of the things I did back in the 70s, but he, long as I live, because of the way he went about it, he's got me to contend with, and I'm a force to be reckoned with. He hadn't seen it yet, but I'm a force to be reckoned when you take something from me that doesn't belong to you, and that's what he's done. So that's why I say if we ever get to the point to where someone, and I did have some people out in Hollywood express some interest in the movie script. They gave a synopsis of it. They hit some points that were not quite accurate, but I didn't argue the point. Just to get it out there and get it reviewed by a producer in Hollywood was important to me because I thought I could springboard off of that. So there's been some interest, but not a whole lot of interest in the point to where we talk an actual contract.
I don't know if you've heard, but they recently announced that they're making this movie that's like the story of Neil Bogart and Casablanca Records, and they're talking about Samuel L. Jackson's going to play George Clinton, and D.L. Hughley is going to play Bootsy Collins in this movie. And so you got me thinking now, who are some actors that maybe will play some of the Dayton musicians if that comes to be?
Yeah, that's true. I heard that also. I didn't hear about Hughley, but I did hear Sam Jackson. He could be a good wild George Clinton. I don't know if Hughley can act like Bootsy, but again, maybe he could. Maybe he will. But yeah, I heard that movie was coming down. But again, our story, because I was very close to the executives at Casablanca back in the 70s. But our story is so unique because it's about a small town guy that had a vision that to help local Black artists get music played on the airwaves that became international. And again, I never forget, Satch had a boa constrictor and as a pet, and it was about 12 feet long, and it was just a couple years old. And it was back during the 70s where we had those colorful pillows that laid around on the floor. And anytime I would go to Satch's on a Friday night or a Saturday night to sip some wine and listen to music, I always wanted to know where that snake was. So we were all sitting around on the floor, and this young lady had kind of nodded off, and she opened her eyes, and this big old snake was looking her straight in the face. Now, the snake was harmless, but you could imagine what would happen after you had been drinking some wine and raised up, and this daggone animal is looking you right in the face. And it was something out of a Looney Tune cartoon. I mean, something I'll never forget. I mean, we just rolled on the floor just because I always wanted to make sure where the snake was. Marshall Jones lived in Jamestown back in 2015, and he had a lady friend come in from Florida, and Marshall lived by himself, so I would leave Central State. It was only about 10 minutes from Central State. Grab a six-pack. We had a couple cigars. We'd sit out on the back porch on a day like today, wait until the wife got off, and we just kind of just reminisce. And his lady friend was there, and I had left, and Marshall had this little terrier. And I would tell Marshall, put this terrier on a chain and put him on the clothesline and let him run because they're real hyper, because Marshall was hard-headed. And he let this terrier loose in the backyard. Now, we're out in Jamestown, which is kind of like a farm. And this terrier got into a pissing match with a skunk. And the skunk sprayed him. And the little dog came yelping back to the house. And Marshall opened up the door. And the little dog jumped right into the girl's lap. She started screaming. She jumped up, turned red. She real light, turned red. Got in the car and drove all the way back to Florida. And Marshall's house smelled like skunk perfume for a month.
Now that is funky.
Yeah, you can't get rid of that real easy. And that was funky. But some of the little silly things that they did, as
Well,
musicians.
the snake thing makes me think of the Barkays. They were the ones that always had the snake on stage, right?
Oh yeah. Well, Barcades emulated a lot of the players' music.
Oh, they did.
Like yeah, like if you hear Charlie Wilson used to use "Oh girl," well, that came from Sugar. He would use
Cameo,
that.
especially, yeah.
Yeah, and Cameo and Lionel Richie with the Commodores. They emulated a lot of the stuff the players did. Of course, a lot of the rappers did that they admit to now. They emulated a lot of their music.
Hey,
And
hey, Turk, I know you had you talked about these special relationships with Heatwave and Slave and some others. I know you had a special one with Roger. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, Roger was a very special individual. He was another Junie, a genius with music. And I had known Roger and his family almost as long as I knew Junie. I did the liner notes on their first album, Freedom, and his brother, big brother Larry, was always the manager of the group. And whenever they had a record, their first record, would Freedom, Larry would bring it down. Roger was a guy would call me and come into the studio to listen to the music, put an ear to the music. They were phenomenal. They did probably more for the community than any of the groups that came from Dayton, Ohio. They had a construction company where they would build homes, and they would build them themselves from the ground floor up. They had all the construction crew, and they knew how to build, and they built some beautiful homes in West Dayton, Ohio, as a family under the leadership of Larry, the big brother, and one of the other big brothers. And Roger did the music. I remember telling Roger when he went out west to do some music with Tupac and Dr. Dre. And when I went to Central State and when I got my doctorate, I challenged all the gangster rappers on their lyric content, sex, drugs, and profanity. So when I went to Central State, I banned all rap music. That was in 1986. Today, they still don't play it. And so I took a firm position on that in 1982. And I told Roger, I said, look, if you get into some gangster rap, man, you can't count on me to play your music because my position is still the same. Well, Chuck, I'm not going to do that. Well, that's all well and good. He went out there. They did California Love. Good song. Went double platinum. Roger didn't own it. Tupac and Dr. Dre owned it. And Roger came back and he had found himself another market. He had found the rap market because the rappers could rap, but a lot of them weren't producers. And Roger was a producer because they had a 48 track studio board in the studio, in their office area on Salem Avenue in Dayton, Ohio. And again, it was great going into the studio, listening. What do you think about this, Turk? And Roger was a spontaneity. He had a lot of spontaneity about him. They would just go in the studio and come out with a song that was a hit record, And Computer Love, Playing Kind of Rough, so More Bounce to the Ounce, and on and on and on. And then he had done something that Stevie Wonder, he took it to another level, that vocoder, because Stevie Wonder had come up with that design, but Roger used that vocoder with that tube in his mouth, and that became his signature when he was on stage. But, to see him perform live on stage, man, was just amazing.
Yeah, I got to see him a few times, and they would carry him in from the back on the shoulders, playing the guitar. Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, Zapp still plays today, 6 months out of the year probably in Japan. They're very popular in Japan. They still carry on their legacy. Terry Troutman, Zapp, and Lester Troutman, the big brother. As a matter of fact, if you saw on YouTube, on one of the shows on the Funk Chronicle, I interviewed Lester and Zapp. And when I interviewed them, I pulled out the album. I brought the album to the show. They didn't know I had it because Larry gave it to me 30 years ago. I have the only one in the world, and I did the liner notes on it. Their mouths dropped open, you know. And that show, that particular show, won an award regionally, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and Kentucky. And it won an award, that particular show. So, you know, it just became an everyday thing, Scott, with me when I was in radio, that when I would leave, I would go into the studio with one of the great artists and listen to the music or music they already had recorded, or Turk, what do you think about this? And, you know, it was just natural. And like I said, there were some people that respected it and a lot of people that didn't. And so, but I guess that's to be expected in anything. But, you know, the bottom line, we had a great time. There were great musicians. People made a lot of money. I was in Larry Troutman's office, and he said, Turk, have you ever seen $1 million? And I said, no, I haven't. He handed me a cashier's check from First National Bank for $1 million. Unfortunately, it was made out to Troutman Enterprise, not to me. But they could do that, you know, and I admired that in them, because I had never seen in my lifetime people with that type of leverage and that type of financial capital. And that was a great thing.
Turk, why do you think, I want to ask 2 questions. I'll make them separate. Why do you think the Ohio players kind of fell apart in the late 70s?
Well, it's easy. Egos, money, drugs, poor management. You know, it's called show business. And I tell anybody that I talk to, if you get into this business, understand the business. You know, there's a book that's behind me on my bookcase called This Business of Music. Pick that book up and read it. Tells you about contracts and royalties and things of this nature, so you won't sign your life away. It's rumored that the Ohio players had $300 million in plagiarism out there. It's rumored. And, you know, the rappers were sampling their music and it wasn't getting played. I have a lot of respect for Jimmy Diamond, who now owns the group, who was with the second generation of the Ohio players after Greg Webster left, but he had been with them for over 40 years. Is very level-headed and very business-wise, and he has my 100% respect. I have a lot of respect for Marshall and Satch and Sugar and Pee Wee, but they weren't good businessmen. They were great musicians and great talent, but not good businessmen. And when you're handling something like $30, $40 million, you know, you got to know how to handle that. I mean, I was out to Marshall's house, back in the 70s, and we were sitting around. His wife, Shar, had made some neck bones and collard green. I mean, we were just the 3 of us. And I'd go out there and we'd sit around and listen to some new music. And we were watching the 6 o'clock news, and the IRS was going into, I believe, Satch's house, taking equipment out on the 6 o'clock news. And I said, Marshall, I think your house is next. So I'm going to leave. I'm going to see you, you know. And those were you know, it was rumored. I don't know. They never discussed it with me because I was not in their business, that they thought they didn't have to pay taxes. So I said it was rumored. Okay. And like I said, I was there just for the music. I did not try to manage them. I did not tell them how to do their business or anything. They let me MC the shows when they were in the area. They paid me my little $100 fee for MCing, and I was happy, because I was on stage with some of the greatest groups of all time. So I just think it was the combination of lack of management, egos, and drugs. And one thing that you'll understand is in a group, there's usually only one star. When you got the Temptations, you had David Ruffin. When you had the Four Tops, you had Levi Stubbs. When you had Gladys Knight and the Pips, you had Gladys Knight. And when you got a group of musicians, and all of them as talented as they were and are, who was the star of the show? Well, we knew it was Sugar at the time. Sugar's deceased now, but the Ohio Players are going on. Roger's deceased now, who was the star of the show, but Zapp is going on. So you tend to bump heads sometime when you're out there and somebody else wants to get some of the limelight and money.
Who also, I guess, turned out to be pretty good in business is Marvin Pierce, right? I think he got out of music, but I hear he's done pretty well.
Marvin was a good businessman, had a good business head on it. As a matter of fact, he owned a dealership that's a Lexus dealership in Dayton. I don't know what happened and why he doesn't own it anymore, because it's been 30 years ago. They don't even remember because of the change of ownership. But Marvin had a very good business head, and he did some good things with some of the money he earned. And I had a lot of respect for Marvin. Marvin was unique. He had a beautiful home out off of North Main Street, and it's still there today, and it looks like something out of the future. I mean, when you walk into it, the walls are doors, almost like the White House, and you don't know which is which. He would know, but he had that type of mind. He could see into the future, and I had a lot of respect for him. But when you have those big egos, Pee Wee and Junie and Sugar and Satch and Diamond, big egos. And at one point in time, they all did play together. Dutch Robinson, Robert Ward, they clashed at some point in time, especially when you're dealing with money. And whoever is, I'm assuming, the lead of the group wanted to get the most money.
What I always felt about the Ohio Players, because they were my very favorite group,
right?
That they should have been as big and have a legacy equal to Earth, Wind, and Fire.
I agree. Again, things happened to the Ohio Players that held them back, that they kind of brought on themselves back in the 70s, that held them back, that never hit Earth, Wind, and Fire. Earth, Wind, and Fire hit a peak, and they stayed at that level. They never dropped off. And every time you saw Maurice and Verdi and the rest of the group, it was always at the same level. I emceed a lot of shows with Earth, Wind, and Fire. The Ohio Play were on a song of theirs, Roller Coaster. They were on a kind of like a roller coaster ride, up and down, up and down. Sometime they were up and sometime they were down. Under Jimmy Diamond now, his leadership, they've been pretty consistent because they're still playing, still performing 40 years later. If that had happened back in the 70s, they would have been on the same level with the Earth, Wind, and Fire. And even the Parliament Funkadelic, as far as that's concerned. Because I think George Clinton is an immense talent. I have some criticism, but I'm not one to criticize George Clinton.
I think one group that I'm not sure we mentioned in talking about all those dating groups is Sun.
Right. Sun with Myron Bird and Kim Jansen, Sean Sandridge, was a group that had general market appeal from the jump. All these guys were very like complected. That's why they call them son. Very nice looking guys. And the music they made, they wanted to start it off in the general market. Sun is here, radiation level. And it took a little bit more promotion for them to start off in the general market, even though they called me in the studio to listen to all their music. And even though I played it, they would have preferred to start off into the general market, which they did not all the time. Kim Yancey's out in Texas now. Byron Bird is in London, England. Excuse me, I'm told that they're going to have a reunion and getting back together. I don't know. I heard that out of New York. But they were an immense group, had their unique, and I keep saying general market, they really didn't have a black sound, okay? They had a kind of a urban general market sound with sun is here, radiation level, things of this nature.
The vocals weren't quite as soulful.
Right, that's my point. And then there was Dayton. See, there was a group named Dayton that Sean Sandridge performed. And Dayton had some big hits. They did a remake of Sly and the Family Stone, Hot Fun in the Summertime, which I played. They did The Sound of Music. They had several great albums when you check the group Dayton on the internet. And they never reached the status that the Ohio Players or Roger reached itself, but they were a great group. Sean Sanders was a graduate of Central State University, and he's still producing today. I'm told they're putting some things together with the Philharmonic in Dayton. They called me about it, and he's still producing today. But they just never reached the same record sale plateau that Roger did, or the Ohio Players did, or even Heatwave did.
Or Lakeside, yeah.
Or Lakeside, yeah, right.
And Roger, though, collaborated on Sun's first hit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They would all kind of get together. I don't know how much they do it now, because I talked to Zapp, and we did have a group called, or we do have a group called Faze-O, which was founded by Satch. And Keith Harrison, who was the leader of Faze-O, or is the leader of Faze-O, has a CD out now called One Love. So he's performing around the area. And back in the 70s, he had that tune called Riding High. And it was a one-hit tune, and it did pretty well, I guess, for him. I played it, and it's part of the genre from the Soul of Dayton, from the artist that came from the Dayton sound of the Soul of Dayton. And just immense talent. I mean, you see these guys perform back then, to see some of them still perform today still brings the great memories of yesterday.
As Riding High, very unique sound. Nothing sounded like it at the time. Interesting to me is how differently that sounded from a lot of their other tracks that sounded kind of like second-tier Ohio Players. But Riding High, to me, had its own thing.
Well, Keith Harrison explains, and I was a little perturbed about it, at a seminar at the University of Dayton in September of 2018, he said that Satch told him, because Keith said, and these are his words, that he was high when he wrote the song. Do not tell the program director, else they won't play the music. And I'm sitting there listening to Keith 40 years later, okay? Because that song charted in 1976, 77. And it charted because I played it. And I think at that time I was the only one that was playing it. And one thing Satch said that was correct, if I had known the song was about drugs, I wouldn't have played it, you know. And then Keith said that it was actually about drugs. That's what he said it was about, but he said it in 2018. He didn't say it in 1978 or 77. So they did have a unique sound, and I still play Riding High today. I was asked to come back to Central State in January 2018 to do a radio show, Deja Vu. You know, been there before. And so I did a show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 6 to 9. And on Monday, I would record generic shows. And good thing I did, because I left in September. I came back in January 2018, left in September 2018, and I'm still on the air. Some of the generic shows, I'm especially on Saturday. So it's kind of nice sitting back on Saturday listening to yourself on the radio. And I still play the funk and the Dayton sound and the Soul of Dayton. I didn't use the Soul of Dayton too much when I was at Central State because I was in Greene County and I was on a state-run radio station, you know. So I stayed in my lane then, you know. But you know, that unfortunately that's going to come up the hard way, and you know, I guess that's just part of the game. Somebody thought that they saw something they can make money off of, and that's what they've been doing for the last 6 years. So,
well, why do you think things started to cool off in Dayton? You know, like in the early '80s. Like,
well, I left in 1983. I was lied on by my music director, Langford Stevens, at the time, who wanted to program WDAO. Bud Crow had been instructed to get rid of me because of that high rating. We were number one in the market. We knocked off the number one country station in the market. And that's part of what's going down now because of discrimination. And so I was fired in 1983. And when I was fired from 1983 to 1985 to when WDAO was sold, the ratings took a drop from a 25.7 share of the market to 8.7. And the owner, Bud Crow, saw his radio station losing numbers and he put it up for sale. $4.5 million. So he owned an AM and an FM. He sold them all. The new company came in, Stoner Broadcasting, was worse than Bud Crow because Bud Crow was a mom and pop. This was a corporation. They did not want WDAO as a standalone 50,000 watt. So they took the frequency and sold it to Clear Channel and took the call letters and put them on the AM, abolished the AM talk radio and took the call letters and put them on AM. AM was 1210 AM sun up to sundown. So they took a 50,000 watt, 3-state coverage, black radio station with an 8.7 share of the market and put it on AM. A black guy by the name of Jim Johnson came up with $700,000 and he's owned it since 1985, correct. And every now and then I take a peek at the ratings to see what the Soul of Dayton is doing. And then I glance down and see if WDAO AM is in there, and they haven't ever shown up in Arbitron ratings in over 35 years. So it was done by design, unfortunately, and you know, and that's, you know, that has to come out. That the ugly snake raised his head. It has to come out. I mean, I can call names of people, so, and I have evidence of everything that I'm telling you about. I have the original bumper sticker. I have the federal trademark. I have the copyright of the movie, The Soul of Dayton, the copyright number. You know, I have the names of the guy who stole. Black guy took it off the Broadcasters Hall of Fame webpage, the image, and the guy who owns the radio station 98.7, which is a Cox Communication broadcast facility, said it was his and he owned the Soul of Dayton. And so he trying to recopy what I did back in the 70s. I'm not going to say he can't do it. I'm just saying the last 6 years he hasn't done it. I had lawyers in Dayton, Ohio that turned out to be duds. I spent over $10,000 of my own money for copyright infringement and trademark, and all I got was a letter of cease and desist, which the guy ignores. And so I have made contact with a female attorney in Washington, trademark and copyright, and I'm just kind of feeling her out right now to see if she's going to be a right fit for me before I jump back in and start spending a lot more money and then wasting it. It's like, unfortunately, it's like pissing in the wind. So,
well, Turk, when you talk about Dayton and not really getting the recognition and wide exposure for what it was and its impact, I think also, though, funk music as a whole hasn't gotten its just due. Don't you agree with that? And if so, why do you think that is?
200%.
Why is that?
Well, let me tell you the way it was when I first brought it in. George Clinton, James Brown, if you said funk back in 1971, 72, 73, it was so close to the other four-letter word, you would make sure that you didn't slip and say that, else your broadcast career was over with. And, it didn't come into fruition till a James Brown said, make it funky. Or George Clinton said, we get the funk, till they start pushing the word F-U-N-K. Now, moving ahead 40 years later, rap music has made a big impact on the market. Hip hop, rap, and gangster rap has made a big impact, and the funk has taken a back seat because of that, even though a lot of the rap, hip hop music today comes from funk music. I have one of my students and one kid from Dayton at a radio station. One works for the other in Las Vegas. And I did an interview with them similar to what we did, or what we're doing last year. And they will tell me about music of their time, of their genre, of their age group, where funk was incorporated into that, because these guys are in their late 30s, early 40s. So they are, a matter of fact, I've entrusted them to the movie script, because one, like I said, is a former student, the other's from Dayton, and he knows about the Soul of Dayton. Now, because they have access to LA and, some of the guys I don't have access to. And you're right. I don't think it's got its props. I think it might get some props if the movie came out, but I think it will come and go. It'll be popular, and then, I compare it to somewhat of the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers could not get a permit to fly their biplane in Dayton, Ohio. So they went to Kitty Hawk. Now, I don't know why they couldn't get a permit and who wouldn't give them a permit. And if you look at the back of Kitty Hawk's license plates, they say first in flight. Well, Dayton, Ohio should say both. They say the birthplace of aviation, and they should say first in flight, because the Wright brothers came from Dayton, Ohio. So somebody 100 plus years ago screwed up big time. What I've been trying to do is make sure that that doesn't happen to my history, you know, or my legacy. Because the story that I told you and everything that I've been saying is true. And nobody could really tell you the same story because I lived it with the guys. I was there with many of them. And I wasn't there to tell a story 30 years later. I was there, I was just having a ball because I was around music that I love, black music, funk music, and we knew we had something that nobody else had. But in Dayton, Ohio, the #1 station is a big country station. And the last thing they want is to have a Turk Logan back in the market wanting to program again. And I made it clear to everybody because a lot of the members that are with the big country station are in the Hall of Fame. And I made it clear to them, I'm 70 years old. I have no interest in coming into Dayton and programming and doing something I did 48 years ago. But I will not, under any circumstances, let anybody knowingly make money off of my fame. And that's what they're doing, you know, because of the way Dayton is. And Dayton's a little bad little market. And I cannot say I can straighten it out because I may not even live that long just to straighten it out. It's a bad little market.